Some insight into what's happening at the DA Federal Congress. We join Govan Whittles, who's on the ground. Govan, good afternoon. Great to catch up with you. Just bring us up to speed with some of the activities that have occurred throughout the day.
Good afternoon, Hugo. Well, we're coming to you live from Midrand at the DA's Congress, and it's the end of day one. There'll be a short closing remarks delivered by Ivan Meyer, Dr. Ivan Meyer. He's the federal chairperson in a few moments. But let's get a wrap of the day's activities. Joining me is the DA's spokesperson for the Congress. She's also the leader of the DA in Parliament, Siviwe, Gwarube. Thank you so much for your time, Ms. Gwarube. Let's begin with a wrap of the day. How has day one gone, and what are your reflections as DA?
I think it's gone. Thank you so much, Govan, and good evening to your viewers. I think it's gone exceptionally well. We saw the opening ceremony with a number of speakers, including our mayors from around the country. But also we saw some robust discussion around constitutional amendments, which is a very critical and a crucial part of Congress. But I think for me, one of the key things was the political maturity we saw in the end, where our two delegates came and made their pleas to our two candidates for the position of federal leader when they were speaking to the delegates about their offer. And again, I think that speaks to the maturity of the internal democracy that we have. So we're quite pleased, and we're looking forward to voting. Begins at 6 a.m. in the morning tomorrow and closes at 9. And so we are hoping everything will go without a hitch.
The amendments to the Constitution went off without a hitch almost. There was some robustness in the discussion around whether there should be a deputy leader of the DA. Was there more debate expected, or were you always expecting things to go this quickly?
So the debate around this amendment is a historical one. It's been happening for many, many years. But of course, to have an amendment passed, you need a 2/3. So I don't know if you remember the Congress before, I think it was 2017, there was a very big push for this amendment. And again, it was a very robust discussion. It was also discussed in the last Congress, and it's been brought up again. So clearly, I mean, there are divided views on whether or not such a position, there's a necessity for such a position. But what is critical for me here is that we could see again, where there is deep disagreement from various people from various provinces, contestation, but still respect for the outcome. And nobody swung any chairs, nobody, walked out and stormed off. This is the outcome of the voting. And so, yes, it's one of those, the constitutional amendments, that a very big part of some of the parties seems to think it's necessary.
Siviwe, in his speech, John Steenhuisen said the DA is fixed. He's alluding to the fact that he believes it was broken before. This looks like a different DA to the one that we saw under Mmusi Maimane's leadership. One of the characteristics of Mmusi Maimane's leadership in the DA then was the existence of the Black Caucus. Does the Black Caucus still exist in the DA?
Look, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure what constitutes one to be the Black Caucus. And I don't know, perhaps my invitation to it was lost in the mail. But I mean, to John's point about whether or not the DA is fixed, I think, look, I mean, Govan, you'll remember, I mean, we suffered great loss, our first electoral loss in 2019. And so, when a political party slides back from, a trajectory of growth, that indicates that something has gone horribly wrong. And the party has had to go through a long process of introspection and reconsolidating so that we can make sure that we are on a growth path for 2024.
Well, the existence of the Black Caucus was quite established under Maimane's leadership. There were a number of leaders who identified with it and noted that it had an influence. Do you think it still has an influence? Is there a consolidation of people trying to put their views across as black leaders and trying to support each other?
Look, I mean, I think it's a strange phenomenon. I mean, whether or not it was in existence is one thing or another, but I think what we've seen here, and we've just spoken about this constitutional amendment, I think what we've seen here, we've seen delegates from various provinces disagreeing robustly about certain things. So I don't think you need not necessarily form part of a exclusively black caucus to drive black issues. And I don't think that there are necessarily black issues that the Democratic Alliance needs to grapple with. I think that leaders in the party need to be able to champion the things that we need to change about the organization, whether it is about how we are handling coalitions or how we are able to attract more voters to the party. And I don't think it's an exclusive discussion to a group of people or a particular caucus. I think it's incumbent to all of us. All of us as leaders need to be occupied by how do we grow this party.
Thank you so much, Siviwe Gwarube. She's the spokesperson for the DA at this Congress. Let's quickly bring in Mr. Regan Allen. He's the MEC for community safety in the Western Cape. And one of the issues here is the devolving of policing powers to provincial level and even to municipal level. In the Western Cape, you're facing an infestation of gangs, out of control violence, and John Steenhuisen is promising to halve violent crime. What are your contributions to this Congress as the MEC in the Western Cape in terms of what you believe can be done?
We have seen in the Western Cape since 2019 with the implementation of the Western Cape Safety Plan, where we have literally put budget to our safety plan in order to put additional boots on the ground in our murder hotspots. We have seen consistently where we are deploying additional boots on the ground, using data, using evidence. We are actually seeing reductions in the murder rate in those hotspot areas. It's a position that we have called consistently for because our policing needs and priorities are not taken into account. So we have had to step up, considering that in the Western Cape we are potentially 20 years behind in terms of the actual resource allocation from the South African Police Service.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Regan Allen. In a moment, we'll speak to Piet Retief from the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality. Sorry, Mr. Retief Odendaal. He's the mayor there. Before we do that, let's cross to my colleague Athi Mtongana, who's standing by with another guest, Glynnis Breytenbach, MP of the Democratic Alliance in Parliament, someone who deals extensively with security matters. She'll continue this conversation.
Indeed, thank you so much, Govan. I am joined by Glynnis Breytenbach. She is a member of the National Assembly, of course representing the Democratic Alliance, where key decisions are made insofar as the legislation is concerned. Now, some of the issues that you touched on here in the Congress for the Democratic Alliance is the constitutional amendments. You had several sessions designed just to have the delegates vote on some of those proposed constitutional amendments. Talk to us about the ones that you proposed in particular.
Well, I proposed the vast majority of the amendments today in conjunction with a team from the Federal Legal Commission of the Democratic Alliance. It's certainly a team effort. We got external legal advice on some of the proposals, and all designed to make the disciplinary processes in the DA more efficient, more effective, more streamlined. Disciplinary processes take a long time. People have become more litigious, so everyone's lawyering up. It stretches the processes out terribly. And so we've tried to find a way to, within the confines of the South African Constitution, the Democratic Alliance Constitution, Federal Constitution, within the prescripts of the rule of law, fair administrative process, and above all fairness, to streamline the process, and we believe that's what we've achieved with these amendments.
That must have not been an easy feat, given the fact that this is a country that prides itself in its constitution and democracy and the rule of law, and you've mentioned yourself that a lot of people run to the courts, for example. So how did you manage to amend that insofar as making sure that it still speaks to the policies and the disciplinary processes of the Democratic Alliance?
Well, the policy and the process of the Democratic Alliance with regards to disciplinary action has always been based on fairness. So, for starters, we've always strived to have a fair process, a process that remains within the prescripts of the rule of law and follows due process. So, but bearing in mind that the South African Constitution trumps everything, and our federal Constitution must be in line with that. We have, in my view, stripped out some of the processes that took a long time. The DA has grown quite a bit over the years. The Constitution doesn't always keep up. The processes don't always keep up. We only have a Congress every 4 or 5 years, 3 or 4 years. So it's not always, and it's hard to amend in between Congresses. So by the time of Congress, as we go along, as we do disciplinaries, as we deal with the Federal Legal Commission processes, we make notes and say this worked, this didn't work, this was an unintended consequence. There's new judgments from various courts, including the Constitutional Court, that we have to work into our processes in order to bring them back into line. And so that's what we've done. It was a time-consuming, long process, but I think that's what we've achieved. Yeah, so I'm very happy about that.
There's quite a number of them. I was speaking to the Premier of the Western Cape, and he was just highlighting some of them. But for you, which ones stand out that are crucial to taking the party forward into the general elections?
Well, the important one, the one that I believe will streamline the process the most, bring about a lot more efficiency and effectiveness, is the establishment of the Federal Tagging Committee. So there's no longer room for some matters to be referred, others not. There's no way to protect some people and report others. Everything goes through one central committee and then gets distributed to either the Federal Legal Commission or to provincial disciplinary committees. But there'll be a record of every single disciplinary action, and so hopefully now none will fall through the cracks. So that's been a problem. The Federal Tagging Committee will sit every 2 weeks, so there will be no delay in referring matters now. So we believe that, as it's been in a trial run and it's worked well, so we believe that will streamline the process. Of course, Amendment 71 was always going to be controversial about removing the right of appeals, which was passed practically unanimously. It doesn't mean that you don't have any recourse. Of course you do, but it will be to courts outside of the democratic alliance. So it will be to the mainstream courts. So people are not without recourse, but I believe it will streamline the process exponentially. So, yeah.
We've heard from the two candidates vying for that top position of federal leader, and given what they said in these last few minutes, do you think both of them have what it takes to be able to then implement those constitutional amendments and really just speak to the values of the Democratic Alliance without, perhaps if you want to, you can perhaps put your weight on whoever thinks
So I'm the chairperson of the Federal Legal Commission. I don't endorse any candidates. I stay very far away from anybody who's standing for any position, and the Federal Legal Commission does not take a view on the capabilities of any candidate. So I'm afraid I have difficulty answering that question.
All right, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it.
Sure.
Glynnis Breytenbach from the Democratic Alliance, of course, in the National Assembly. She was crucial in the planning process and just the entire long process of trying to make constitutional amendments for the Democratic Alliance, which are very crucial going into the 2024 general elections in the country. She's saying she does not want to basically put anyone forward in terms of who she's vying for that top leadership position. But of course, you heard from both of the candidates very confident in taking the party forward. Well,